All right, good evening. I'd like to call the February 24th, 2026 Planning Commission regular meeting to order. The Planning Commission is holding hybrid meetings. Members of the public can attend the meeting in person or observe the meeting on Zoom online by visiting www.cityofarcata.org and following the live meetings link at the bottom of the city's homepage or on the city's YouTube channel. If you are attending remotely, please be aware that the Zoom feed provides the closest to real-time stream. If you rely on the other feeds and you wish to make comments, please be aware of the time lag on those feeds. The first item on our agenda is the land acknowledgement. The City of Arcata acknowledges that the lands we are located on are the unceded ancestral lands of the Wiyot tribe. The land that Arcata rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Gudene, meaning over in the woods or among the redwoods. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments remove the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from the land and threaten to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Arcata acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement seeks to aid in dismantling the legacy narratives of settler colonialism. Staff, I lost staff. 1 second. David, would you mind calling roll?
Commissioner Hickey,
Here.
Commissioner Ham,
Present.
Commissioner Lehman,
Here.
Commissioner Tagney,
Here.
Vice Chair Strickland,
Here.
and Chair Simmons.
Here. And we are joined today by Community Development Director David Loya. Next on our agenda, we have early oral communications. During this time, people may make comments about items that are not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on one of our agenda items, you will have an opportunity when we are discussing those items. If you have comments about items that are not listed on the agenda today, please line up now behind the lectern. If you are on Zoom and you wish to make comments on matters that are not on today's agenda, please raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon on the right side of your screen or by pressing *9 on your phone. The clerk will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. With that, I'd like to open public comment. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to comment during early oral communications. Feel free to state your name for the record. And can we have the first speaker, please?
Hi, thank you, Planning Commission. My name is Lulu Michelson, and I am a lecturer at Cal Poly Humboldt, and I am teaching local government planning. And so, with the permission of David Loya, we are here today as the local government planning class to observe the Planning Commission meeting. We also joined you around this time last year, and the student feedback we got from our attendance last year was really positive. And for many folks, this is their first time ever attending a public meeting, and so it's really meaningful for us to happen to have it coincide when our class normally meets. And so it's a really awesome site visit. So we have I think 23 of our students here today along with me who are going to just be observing. We just finished, we're doing our first unit right now, so we learned about the general plan and zoning, and so it'll be really interesting to talk about the local coastal plan. For last week's assignment, students were asked to spend time in your parcel GIS public facing platform and look at where the coastal zone boundary is located. So I think this will feel really relevant to folks, and it's just a great resource to be able to be here today. And also, just so you know, for the class, that these are all folks who are doing this on their volunteer time. So we're really grateful to have such attentive commissioners helping to shape the future of planning in our community. And the last thing will say is that our class formally ends at 6:20. So even if your meeting is not done, we will try to quietly and politely exit at that time, just because that's when our class formally ends. So thank you again for having us here. We'll just be observing and look forward to learning about what you're talking about today. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other early oral communications? Do we have anyone online? Okay, with that, I'm going to close that item and we will move on to the consent calendar. We have one item on consent, which is to approve the Planning Commission minutes from our regular meeting held on January 27th, 2026. Would any commissioner like to pull this item, or do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We will move on to our public hearing this evening, which is to recommend approval of the comprehensive update to the Arcata Local Coastal Program, CEQA exempt. David, will you please provide a report?
Yeah, good evening, Commission and members of the public. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'll pull up a PowerPoint presentation. I'm also joined by our consultant, Ben Noble, who was really instrumental in bringing this work to fruition. We also have Amber Levitt with the California Coastal Commission staff online. And we'd like to give you a general update of what we've been doing in the last several months. As you recall, the Planning Commission was looking at the local coastal program in late fall, and we continued those meetings to this time so that we had time to work with the Coastal Commission staff to address primarily the sea level rise policy and implementation so that when we submit it to them for their certification, they don't have to go through a policy balancing for the sea level rise components. That's an area where they can't do conflict resolution through policy balancing. And so really the work that we've been doing over the last several months is to identify policy changes that were necessary so that staff felt that they could bring this to the commission and ask for certification. So I'll get into that in a little bit, but I wanted to start a little higher level to discuss the purpose of the LCP. Some of this is review for you, but also wanted to have Ben address some of the changes that we've made. Generally speaking, I'll get into a little bit of detail about what's been modified on the map. And then I want to dig into the policy a little bit to give you hooks for your discussion. If you find anything in that policy discussion that you want to dig into deeper, we'll go back into it in more depth. Okay, so again, starting really high level, the Local Coastal Program, or LCP, only regulates land uses in the coastal zone. And so everything that's inland is not affected by these documents. And in fact, I'm not going to go into the detail, but a majority of the coastal zone is actually still regulated by the Coastal Commission. Primarily the areas that are already developed in the city of Arcata are the areas that are in our local coastal jurisdiction. The way that we structured the local coastal program this time, you may recall, is that it mirrors the General Plan 2045. And so we just went through the General Plan comprehensive update process, adopted that in 2024, had a lot of policy discussions about what we should do in terms of zoning and land use and what areas should be reserved for what kinds of protections and preservations. All of that is mirrored. And so you'll see, these areas here, residential medium or commercial industrial as shown in the south, the areas that are zoned for agricultural in the General Plan 2045, those mirror in the citywide zoning ordinance as base zones and in the local coastal land use and zoning as overlay zones, or we call them combining zones in our jurisdiction. So the way the combining zones work, just to refresh your memory, is that you have layers. It's like applying different standards with different layers and combining them together. And so on top of a property, which is a physical thing out in the world, we have our zoning, which is an imaginary thing that we lay over that property, and we give certain attributes to that zoning. Maybe it's a residential medium density zoning property, so you can build apartments on it. We then have this combining zone or overlay zone, and in the coastal zone, that overlay zone would mirror the residential medium base zoning that we had, and it would be coastal residential medium. And the reason why we're doing these mirrored zonings is that we're trying to allow the zoning ordinance to take care of the majority of the standards that we want to regulate within the city. And we're using the local coastal program and coastal zoning ordinance to regulate only those standards that are provisions or land use regulations that are necessary to regulate density and intensity of land uses in the coastal zone and or address the effects to coastal resources. And we're not adding anything else in that LCP that isn't required to do that. That's our strategy. We want a really slim coastal program that is really targeted and effective. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to ask Ben Noble to join us, and he can introduce himself and his topics. Been told I need to switch to HDMI 2 so that we can see his screen. Hey, Ben.
Hello. So I am sharing my screen. Is it visible for you?
We can see it, but it's not in presentation mode.
Ah, interesting. Okay, let me try again then. How about now?
That's perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so my name is Ben Noble. I'm a city planning consultant uh, who's been working with David and the city of Arcata on the LCP update. So I'm really happy to be here tonight to be here for this important moment to consider for you to consider a recommendation of adoption of the LCP update. So I think, as you know, the LCP first needs to be adopted locally, and then we submit it to the Coastal Commission for them to consider for their certification. So given that the LCP will need to be certified ultimately by the Coastal Commission, we've been working really closely with Coastal Commission staff in order to produce a document that is certifiable by the Coastal Commission with only minimal changes after it's locally adopted. So for many months now, we've been meeting weekly, sometimes 2 times a week with Coastal Commission staff to discuss the LCP update. And I should mention that the local coastal program has 2 primary components. There's the land use plan that we're calling the local coastal element, that's part of the general plan, and then the coastal zoning ordinance that will live in the municipal code that will include the implementation of the local coastal element. So Coastal Commission staff has been reviewing and commenting on drafts of both the local coastal element and the coastal zoning ordinance, with particular attention being given to the sea level rise chapter in the local coastal element and the sea level rise section within the coastal zoning ordinance. And one of the reasons why sea level rise has been such a important focus of attention is because that's a key part of this policy balancing that David mentioned. So in order for the Coastal Commission to certify the city's strategy for sea level rise adaptation, particularly within the sea level rise adaptation zones, there needs to be a consideration of competing Coastal Act policies and finding that overall the LCP is consistent with the Coastal Act and by balancing different competing policies, particularly related to shoreline protective structures and wetland fill and other similar issues. And so when the city adopts the LCP locally, we need to have those policies in place that will allow the Coastal Commission to make the finding of policy balancing without having to go back for further revisions to the city. So we've been spending a lot of our time over the last couple of months getting into the details of policies related to sea level rise to set the city up for being able to have the document certified by the Coastal Commission through this policy balancing finding. So I just wanted to give a little bit of more background on that particular subject before diving into a little more detail on what we think is an important part of the coastal zoning ordinance, which is a number of different new procedures intended to streamline the permitting process. And this is consistent with the city's citywide permitting process, looking for opportunities for ministerial approval of development projects that are consistent with applicable standards. So that's a general approach that the city has for planning permitting citywide. And we're also applying that within the coastal zone, consistent with the requirements of the Coastal Act. So there are three topics that I wanted to speak to briefly. One is a new process for waivers for de minimis development. Another is a new ministerial uh, coastal development permit. And then also to speak a little bit about the Gateway District permitting. So, on the waivers, uh, this is something actually that's addressed in the Coastal Act and the Coastal Commission's regulations. And it's a process that allows the city to approve um, very minor development in the coastal zone without a full coastal development permit. So it's designed for a streamlined review of very minor projects that clearly pose no risk to coastal resources, but doing that in a way that still preserves opportunities for public oversight and ensures consistency with coastal protection policies. So in order for development to be eligible for de minimis, waiver of de minimis development, it needs to be within the city's permit jurisdiction and in an area and of a type of development that's not appealable to the Coastal Commission. So it might be a limited number of development types of projects in the future that's eligible for a de minimis finding. And for a de minimis waiver, the city administrator is the decision maker, and the city administrator can determine that the project is considered de minimis only if, upon finding that there's no potential for adverse effects on coastal resources, including impacts on habitat, water quality, public access, scenic views, and things like that. And it also needs to be fully consistent with the LCP, including policies in the local coastal element, as well as in the coastal zoning ordinance. There is public notice of a pending de minimis decision that's provided to the applicant, to persons who have requested written notice, property owners and residents within 300 feet of the parcel containing the project, as well as notice to the Coastal Commission of a pending decision. Now, also with waivers for de minimis development, anybody can request a report to the city council on the project for which the waiver is proposed. And then the city council could choose to require that a full CDP be processed for the development. So there's a mechanism for the public and the city council to kick the development back into the standard CDP process. So this is a process that's sort of dictated by the requirements of the Coastal Act and Coastal Commission regulations. Many cities in the coastal zone have this process. The city currently doesn't have it, and so we're establishing this new process in the coastal zoning ordinance. Okay, so the next topic is the ministerial CDP. And so this is a type of a coastal development permit that's new. The city doesn't have it already. That would allow for by right approval of proposed development that conforms to all applicable objective standards. So the general purpose of this type of CDP may feel familiar to you because cities throughout California, including Arcata, are relying more and more on ministerial approvals of proposed development if it complies with all objective standards. And a lot of this is being driven by new housing laws that require cities to approve certain types of development in certain locations through a ministerial process. The city already has a similar type of permit for the Gateway District. It's called a Gateway ministerial approval. And this would be a similar type of permit that would be used for processing CDPs. So in the coastal zoning ordinance, it states that accessory dwelling units that comply with all applicable standards require a ministerial CDP, that development within a gateway district that complies with all applicable standards also requires a ministerial CDP. And we also leave the door open for other types of development that in the future the city may decide is appropriate for a by right approval process. And so with a ministerial CDP, these would be acted on uh, acted on by the zoning administrator, and it would occur concurrently with the building permit. There would be a public notice of a application that's been submitted, as well as a notice of final action. So there's an opportunity for the public to be aware that there's a pending ministerial CDP application, and also to be aware um, of when a decision is made, so that there is an opportunity.
Recording stopped.
So that there is an opportunity to appeal that decision if desired by any interested person. But there is no public hearing. And the development is approved if it complies with all applicable objective standards. So moving away from the use of subjective approval criteria and replacing that with a reliance on objective standards as the basis to take action on a application. So that's the new ministerial CDP. And what I'll say about the Gateway District is that in that area, that's within the coastal zone, a ministerial CDP is required for the project if it complies with all applicable objective standards. And so this mirrors the permitting requirements for the gateway ministerial permit that's established within the gateway code that applies both within and outside of the coastal zone. And as I mentioned before, conformance with objective standards is the approval criteria. The development also needs to comply with all applicable resource protection standards, and there's a lot of those in the coastal zoning ordinance to ensure that coastal resources are adequately protected. And there is a public notice of application and decision process similar to what's in the Gateway Code. And then also on the appeals within the Gateway Code, there is language that limits the subject to appeal only to project conformance with objective standards. And so the ministerial CDP requirement sort of mirrors that language as well. Projects can be appealed, but the subject of that appeal is limited to whether or not the project is consistent with applicable objective standards. So the approach to permits in the Gateway District, the coastal, the ministerial CDP, as well as the waiver for de minimis development, is all part of the city's larger strategy to streamline desired forms of development, particularly new residential development, in a way that allows for public involvement in that decision making, as well as the protection of coastal resources consistent with the requirements of the Coastal Act. So we're really excited and enthusiastic about these new permitting pathways that are included within the coastal zoning ordinance. And one of the reasons why we included the new ministerial CDP is because we need that kind of ministerial process for accessory dwelling units and other types of residential development that require ministerial approval under state law. So over the last couple of months, really over the last 6 months, we've been having discussions with the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, as well as Coastal Commission staff on how we can comply with both state ADU law as well as with the Coastal Act. And so what we have ultimately done is include it within the coastal zoning ordinance, an ADU ordinance that does that, that is both compliant with state ADU law and the Coastal Act, and does it in a way that harmonizes those two state mandates. And so what you have in the draft coastal zoning ordinance is an ADU section and a JADU section that includes only the provisions that are required by state law, nothing beyond that. And that's consistent with the city's overall strategy for the coastal zoning ordinance that David described previously. So you'll see within the coastal zoning ordinance an ADU section with language on where ADUs are allowed, what the permit requirements are, what development standards are for different types of ADUs, including maximum height, minimum setbacks, and maximum floor area standards. There's language about statewide exemption ADUs, and those are certain types of ADUs that under state law, the city can only apply a very limited set of standards. And so we need to have that within the coastal zoning ordinance to harmonize the city's coastal zoning ordinance with state law and to be consistent with state law on those types of ADUs. We also have some provisions unique to ADUs on coastal resource protection that's necessary because these ADUs are being approved ministerial based only on compliance with objective standards. And so the city and the Coastal Commission can't rely on subjective policy consistency for ADUs, can rely only on the only on the objective standards. So we need to make sure that there are sufficient objective standards to address the important coastal resource protection issues for ADUs. And then there are a number of other provisions that state law say must be within a local ADU ordinance. That includes rules for rentals and sales. These are all rules. These are all requirements that the city complies with when reviewing and acting on ADU applications. But in order to have a complete and legally adequate ADU ordinance, those provisions need to be included within the city's locally adopted ADU ordinance. So that's why you see those sorts of details in the ordinance as well. So, I think the last thing I'll say with the accessory dwelling units is that it's a sort of interesting example of how you have state housing law that needs to be harmonized with the California Coastal Act, with a process that allows for the ministerial approval of ADUs consistent with the Coastal Act policies. And my prediction is that in the future, we're going to see more of that, where the state requires cities to allow more types of development by right, including within the coastal zone. And with the new ministerial CDP provisions, we now have sort of a process in place that will provide a framework for the city to be able to review and act on those types of applications. So with that, I'll sort of hand things back to David, and I think he's going to speak a little bit more about some of the specific policy revisions that we've made to address Coastal Commission comments over the last couple of months.
Yep. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I do want to come up for a breath of air real quick. We've been going for a bit. I want to make sure that there are no questions of the material to date.
I'd like to ask, can I, or can you provide some examples of de minimis development?
Anything coming on the top of your mind, Ben?
Yeah, so as I said, it's intended for very minor projects that clearly pose no risk to coastal resources, but that would otherwise require a CDP. So it might be small additions to, say, existing development within areas with no coastal resources where there's just clearly no potential to impact coastal resources, and the city can make a de minimis finding.
Does that make sense?
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, on the ADU ministerial process, the coastal resource protection category sounds like it could potentially rub against the state ministerial rights for ADU construction. And I'm just wondering if you can give us a come into conflict.
Yeah, for all of those standards, really, if the ADU doesn't comply with the objective standards, it doesn't mean that you can't build an ADU. It just means that you have to go through a coastal development permit process. And so with resource protection, the types of things we were thinking about were, environmentally sensitive habitats, buffers around environmentally sensitive habitats, that sort of thing, blocking, access to the coast. Those are the types of projects where we would assess them and say, look, this doesn't comply with the standard. You can try your luck at a coastal development permit, but we're not going to permit you ministerially.
So perhaps like South G Street, where a lot of properties back up to inland waterway that is tidal. Mm-hmm. If there was a garage that would fit in the ADU category, but it's affected by tidal flow, that might be an example of where they would have to get a coastal development permit.
Yeah. From what I'm understanding of your question, that would be a good example.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other quick questions about what we've... Okay, I'm going to dig into a little bit of detail about what is different in the February 17th version that's on our website right now from what you reviewed previously, and to highlight a little bit of the work that we did with the Coastal Commission. I also want to touch base on changes to the Coastal Visitor Serving Zone, and we'll start with that. You recall at your last meeting, we got input from the Planning Commission to give to the Coastal Commission about the direction we wanted to go with coastal visitor serving. They appreciated that feedback and input, and I think we're honing in. There's still a few questions about the specific details, but I think we're honing in on the target. And so just to remind you, this is really using coastal visitor serving zoning to facilitate sea level rise adaptation through what I call market-friendly zoning. This is an image from South G Street. You can see the old industrial properties that are, in process of converting to new uses, some of them anyway. And as you recall from discussions before, the idea was if we had a visitor serving overlay, we might be able to take one of these properties that has, right now it's being effectively used as a scrapyard, and maybe convert it to, an RV, visitor serving use, or hotel visitor serving use, that type of thing. The visitor serving area is again an overlay, and it's indicated by the dashed lines around the properties on South G. The underlying zoning overlay that's in the coastal zone is commercial industrial, which is kind of like a light commercial zoning district. And one of the things we did recently was expanded this commercial overlay to include the Little Lake property that the city owns, to try and do some commercial activities on that property as well. So the Coastal Commission has agreed with this area, and they really want to see us use this area as well. Right now, as I presented before, there are a handful, maybe 13 or so businesses that are probably considered commercial visitors serving in the area already. I just had a point of contact from somebody who's interested in opening a new commercial visitor serving business in the area. And so this area is really transitioning over time all by itself. But what we're hoping to do with this zoning type is to drive the market to make it more attractive for people to site here and provide opportunities for, you know, our residents and people coming through the community to be able to enjoy this area for more than just the marsh. So that is underway, and the Coastal Commission staff has supported that. I'll provide you more details as we learn them about what the standards would be. Right now, we're suggesting using sort of 25% of the properties developed for commercial visitor serving as a threshold. And I think we discussed this last time as well. And so that's kind of our proposal. We're waiting to hear from the Coastal Commission staff. Yeah, just to reiterate, this coastal zoning would create lower intensity uses with higher return on the investment, dedicate access to the perimeter for public access, and then we'd convey that risk associated with sea level rise through these approvals by recording on title requirements for notice and indicating that they'd have to clean those sites up when they're no longer usable. Wanted to touch base on just a couple of updates to the map from prior versions. And so some of these were driven by Coastal Commission staff. These two properties on the South G Street, right where South G Street turns into a concrete paved area, and the last little off-ramp here from Highway 101. These sites were previously industrial general, and so the heaviest type of industrial uses allowed within the city of Arcata would have been allowed on these properties. It was a little bit of an oversight as we were going through and doing the revisions to the zoning code. Coastal Commission staff asked if maybe we'd like to make these industrial limited or commercial industrial instead. And so we took that and ran with it. We're proposing to change these in the final zoning map. This would match the types of uses that are on the site right now. So this wouldn't be a situation where we'd be creating a nonconformity and the property owner wouldn't be happy with this change. I think they'd be quite happy. Another change occurs in the Gateway Barrel District. I know this is completely out of context for most people, and this is just a blob on the map, but you can see In Street ends right here. This is where the Hirsch Hubcaps property used to be here. There's a new multi-family mixed-use development here. These are the rail tracks coming through the Winkle Floyd property. This is Samoa Boulevard, and this is Slaughterhouse Road, the western boundary of the city on this side. There's an old log pond in this area that's clearly a wetland. This area is identified on the National Wetlands Inventory map as a wetland. And previously, this entire area that is in this parcel was zoned for open space. We intended to correct this during the gateway process, and it was just one of the things that fell through the cracks. Right now in our land use and zoning for the citywide documents, this is still shown as open space. We're proposing to change this in the local coastal program to make it consistent with a future amendment to the land use map in the general plan and the zoning map, where we'll propose amending this so that this area can be used for development as well. So that's another change that we're proposing here. Lastly, we have a couple of parcels that were goldenrod. So we had yellow against goldenrod and just did not see that we didn't catch this on the original change. You may recall the discussion from the general plan land use updates that we did where we changed all of these properties from residential very low to residential medium. And all of these properties, with the exception of these, got that change applied to them. And so I caught this recently and decided, hey, let's fix this in the local coastal program while we have the opportunity now. You'll see this come back with the work that Lisa Weiss Consulting is doing for us through the HUD Pro Housing Grant, where we're updating the land use zoning and land use maps. So real minor changes in terms of the land use map. The rest of it is exactly like you've seen it before. There were several text updates, and I've got like 15 pages, and these are all in track changes. They're in different colors. They're going to make your eyes go crisscrossed. I don't want you to try and read this. I'm going to try and summarize these quickly as we go through them, just as, again, a hook if anybody wants to come back to these. I want to take a moment and mention that both versions of the local coastal element, the policy document, and the coastal zoning ordinance, the regulatory document, in both clean versions so you can read them easily, and the track changes version so you can see what we fiddled with, are on our website under the link that's in the staff report. And so I also sent those out early to people who are interested, including planning commissioners, to let you know those were up. We made minor amendments between the time when I first noticed in early January and now. That's why we're on February 17th, 2026, version 4. Version 4 incorporates those changes I just discussed, and then a few other minor changes to maps primarily. So yeah, you can find the track changes versions if you want to see what we fiddled with. Again, most of what we worked on was related to sea level rise. I want to take a moment and really acknowledge the work that the Coastal Commission staff did. We were definitely a squeaky wheel. I feel like, the conversations were at times tense. The conversations were at times jovial, but we were all really committed to working on this document and finding something that was mutually agreeable. I really appreciated that coastal staff shared the updates that we were doing with their engineering team, with their legal team. They shared the ADU sections with the folks that are working closely with HCD. I have a high level of confidence that we are very close on these documents. It's not to say that things still won't change as we go through the process and they won't come back with recommendations for modifications. But the thing that we did much, much better this time than we did last time in 2012, we went for a comprehensive update, is that we all really dug into the details very deeply. Again, this is an area where Ben Noble, if he wasn't on the team, this work just wouldn't have happened. I didn't have the capacity. Nobody on my team had the capacity or the aptitude or Ben's level of attention to detail to have addressed the comments in the ways that he did. And so just a shout out to everyone who is involved in this work, because this is like, hours and hours and lots of gray hairs later. Okay, so with that, we focused on several policies in the sea level rise section to make sure that we cross that threshold for policy balancing. A lot of this stuff is just really common sense changes that, that really don't affect our overall approach. You may recall from previously, we had described different buckets that we anticipated having in terms of the changes. The bucket of changes that were recommended by Coastal Commission staff that we all agreed to, thought were great. The bucket of changes where maybe we still wanted to have a conversation. And then the bucket of changes where we were probably going to put our foot down and try and stand firm and make a pitch to the Coastal Commission itself that, hey, look, this is a local coastal program. This is what we're standing by. We don't want to make the change that your staff are recommending. That bucket is tiny at this point. In fact, I can't think of a single example of policy changes that we didn't ultimately resolve. We've still got lots of work to do, but we've done that amount of work to date. So I'll just start and go through them. Sea level rise hazards report. This was a minor change and a little bit of update. Basically, just saying that we have to assess sea level rise. A lot of the work that we tried to do in the sea level rise section was to make it so that, in particular in Zone 1, the developed areas, that individuals, when they come in, don't have to do their own sea level rise report. That adds a lot of cost to each project, and for the most part, they're going to say the same thing if they're done within several years of each other. So we tried to structure our zoning ordinance so that it was largely standards based. But we wanted to make sure that there was a backdoor that allowed for sea level rise hazards reports. Again, the Coastal Commission wanted a lot more detail on risk disclosure and acknowledgement. We had already baked into the policy the requirement that if you're going to develop in zone 1, you were going to have to record something on title. This just gets into a lot more minutia. That was one of the biggest battles between us and coastal staff. Like, how many words do we have to actually use? How many policies do we have to actually use? Here's one where they won the arm wrestling, and we have a lot more detailed policy. I think this is good overall because it really helps us convey to the public what we mean when we're asking for risk disclosure. It goes on. Several policy areas were amended so that the, sorry, I'm just noticing one of our TVs just went off. Several of the policy areas were amended to reflect the timing. The Coastal Commission staff were a little concerned that our policies, they'd be adopted and then not amended. Our current LCP that we're working with was last adopted or major amendments in 1994. Some of the folks in this room probably weren't born before 1994. And so, that just gives you a sense for how long these policies stick around sometimes. And so, like you'll notice, each one of these start off in the near term. That's not really defined, but it gives us a little bit of a sense that, we're talking about a living document that we want to continue to assess and evaluate, that in the near term, the city's going to support continuation of existing commercial uses, expand those uses, ensure that Arcata residents and visitors can enjoy them, and so on and so forth. This set of policy, these are the lead-in to our strategy that commercial visitor serving policy was intended to implement. The idea that while we have time over the course of the next 50 or 70 years before the most significant impacts of sea level rise are really affecting these areas, we want to use market forces to help adapt and change the uses out there. And so luckily coastal staff worked real closely with us to, address their concerns, but also maintain the intent that we had originally set out to maintain.
Can I pause you and ask you to go back one slide so that I can ask a question on it? Or, sorry, 2 slides. The one, yeah. So that's as a condition of coastal permits. Is that both CDPs and the new ministerial CDP that we're adding? So would this be required for, say, like the Barrel District?
These would not be required in the Barrel District, and I will double check and confirm this, but I think that this policy specifically references, and I actually in the meeting when I get a moment, I'll pull up the document and show you where in the document 839 occurs, but these are primarily in areas that are subject to these types of hazards. And so it doesn't explicitly state this, but if you're in zone 1, for example, you're subject to sea level rise at some point in the future. We know that you're in those mapped areas. You get a coastal development permit, whether it's a ministerial permit or full CDP that comes to Planning Commission. We're going to implement this policy. We're going to record something on your title that acknowledges that when we give you this permit, there's no guarantees. We went and included things like fire hazards. Right now, we don't have a large fire hazard in Arcata, but things are changing. And so we have the policy grounding so that if we do end up having higher fire hazards in the future, particularly in the coastal zone, we could use this policy for that as well. So it's really intended to be sort of a catch-all, but it wouldn't be that every single permit gets one of these disclosures. It's only if you're in a hazard area.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for coming. Y'all can stick around for extra credit. One of the other policies that we added, because clearly part of our commercial visitor serving strategy and the idea of using market forces to incentivize redevelopment and adaptation was that those sites would be cleaned up. But we didn't really have a policy that explicitly stated this. Coastal Commission asked us to put something in that was real specific about remediating environmental contamination on these sites. And we jumped at it. I mean, that was always the intent. We think that's a really good idea. So staff recommends this change. Again, this is just an example of a policy where, We had a lot of discussion around what shoreline protective devices, how we would treat these in the LCP. And we modified this language pretty heavily over time, but the good news is that, you know, I think that we ended up with a policy that still allows us to essentially effectuate what we've been talking about for the last several years in terms of sea level rise policy, and addresses Coastal Commission's concerns about making sure that there's some ability to, you know, to point back to policies in the Coastal Act so that there's consistency. Again, you know, here's a perfect example. We had wetland fill was allowed to protect sea level rise in adaptation zone 1. The example that I use to give you some grounding for that is, you know, if we had to, for example, elevate a tide gate because the tides were rising and the tide gate wasn't working anymore because, you know, the tide wasn't at that elevation, we had to elevate it. That elevation would by definition require us to create some fill to support that higher tide gate. That fill, because of its location in a tidal prism, is in a wetland. And so we had a policy that allowed for filling wetlands in these limited circumstances. This gave Coastal Commission staff a lot of heartache. We ultimately navigated around this. And in particular, you know, Coastal Commission will look at our local coastal program for guidance when they're making coastal permit decisions in our jurisdiction, in their permit jurisdiction. But at the end of the day, they are the ones that are responsible for issuing the permit. So this language, I feel like, was something where we did a lot of negotiations and worked together to come up with something that, you know, got across the point we were trying to make, but they felt like they could ultimately issue a permit based on it. We had a couple of added policies that really tried to ensure that there were triggers and studies that would allow us to know when do we need to start retreating. So the idea is that, you know, we think this is going to happen sometime in the distant future. So this policy 8371 and 8370, want to point out that we're up to policy number 7071 in just this section. That these policies really help us to identify those future planning efforts. We're already starting to work on this one. The city was just notified recently that we were awarded an Ocean Protection Council grant to start doing some adaptation pathways planning. So I'm working with environmental services and a great collaboration to start that work already. So I'm hopeful we'll be able to make this no later than January 1, 2034 deadline. Again, this policy goes on and on and on. I want to close. There's a whole lot of other changes, and I hope you've had a chance to look at the track changes version. If there's anything that piqued your curiosity, we'll definitely come back to those. But I also wanted to draw your attention to the public comment that we received from Waterkeeper. This is something that our supervisor Mike Wilson, has also been very interested in. Something that, you know, we were also very interested in. We gave it our best shot to try and really emphasize in the draft that we made that, you know, we're intending to follow dark sky compliant standards using Dark Sky International's requirements. The comment letter from Waterkeeper on this topic, I support most of the changes that they're proposing here, and with the commission recommendation, we're going to make a recommendation to the council as well that we incorporate most of what's in here. This just gives us a little bit more detail, in particular, you know, identifying the maximum lumens and the temperature range. These were important details that weren't specifically in our standards. Having them in our standards and going back to those ministerial permits are going to make them so that we can actually effectuate these on the ground without having to wonder, well, can we actually ask them to go limit to 3,200 lumens per fixture and, you know, 2,700 kelvins. It's in the document now. What I would say is that the way this is structured isn't exactly the way that I would structure an ordinance. So this page, you know, I think is fine. The changes they've made, I'd recommend them. This page, I would drop this. We don't want to have links to web pages in our ordinance. And we'd recommend pulling these principles into the actual text instead of making them a footnote. So here's an area where, we'd like to get, some direction from Planning Commission as well.
Do you know where those lumen quantities came from? In particular, 1,100 lumens inside a house? That's not a very bright light, depending on what you're doing. I mean, for sort of area lighting it is, for task lighting it's not.
Yeah, lighting inside of houses is less of a concern. These are intended for outdoor lighting standards.
Where's the 1,100 lumens?
It's residential, but it's not inside the house. It's, like a porch light or.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's right here.
Is that what you were talking about, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The Chair Simmons is absolutely right. That's residential outdoor lighting, limited to 1,100 lumens, not the indoor lighting. So the indoor lighting isn't regulated by this. Sorry for the confusion.
You should say that.
Okay, yeah, definitely. We'll make sure that this is clear, that it's applicable to the outdoor lighting fixtures, the entire section, not just bullet A.
Do you have something to? Nope.
So that is what I have on the nitty-gritty details. And so just to bring it back to the staff recommendation is that you adopt resolution PC 25-04, which would make the findings and a recommendation to the City Council that they adopt the February 17th, 2026 version 4 of the local coastal program, with the addition of some dark sky international modifications, largely as proposed by the Waterkeeper, our friends at Waterkeeper.
Thank you. Go ahead, Peter.
David, I'm looking at, I think, the coastal plan that you pointed us to, that's on the city website. And this is a small detail, but the zoning map that's shown in the version I have is not quite the same as the one you showed. That Little Lakes property doesn't get included in my map. Let's see, it's on page 10 of the PDF.
I'm sorry, is that the local coastal?
Oh, it's on,
element?
well, that's, okay. That looks correct.
This is, okay, so this is in the coastal zoning ordinance. The local coastal element. Whoops. Okay, access denied. Give me just a moment, I'll pull it off the web.
If commissioners don't have any other clarifying questions, I was thinking we could open it up for public comment before moving on to our general discussion. Does that sound good to other folks? So if anyone would like to give public comment on this item, you'll have 3 minutes each. Line up behind the lectern if you're interested in speaking on this item. No takers? David, is there anyone online who would like to speak?
Yeah, our Amber Levitt, our representative from Coastal Commission, would like to speak. Go ahead, Amber.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Amber Levitt. I'm a supervisor in the North Coast District Office of the Coast Commission. I'm one of many commission staff, present and past, who've been working with the city on this LCP update. Mostly here to answer any questions the commissioners may have for commission staff, but also just wanted to acknowledge and say how much we appreciate all the time and effort that the city has put into this update over the years, particularly the work around sea level rise, which we've been happy to help support with our LCP grant program. Yeah, it's exciting to see this effort coming to a conclusion. And yeah, just wanted to share our appreciation for all the collaboration, especially over the last several months. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you for being
Thanks,
here.
Amber.
You're right. It's different than the one I have. I don't have the most up-to-date one, I guess.
May I ask a question of Amber?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Amber, can you compare our process to other similar coastal cities along California's coast?
Yeah, I could speak generally about it. I personally don't have a ton of experience working with jurisdictions on particularly comprehensive updates. Sorry, I can't see all of you, so I'm talking to the void. But generally speaking, comprehensive updates are always complicated. They're always or generally drawn out efforts. But the cities is slightly more complicated than some, just because of the sea level rise approach that the city is taking. This is, there's in some cases jurisdictions will propose policies in a way that much more closely kind of match, maybe even verbatim, the policies in the Coastal Act and things like that. So it's just more simple to review and find consistent and things like that. Some jurisdictions just have more simple approaches to things, but that's not saying that's always the better approach. Especially sea level rise just in and of itself is a complicated thing to deal with, and we're actually encouraging in most cases having a more tailored approach and having specific policies. And why we're really pushing for comprehensive planning around sea level rise. It's the more specific policies, but with that comes complications with our review and everything. So that's part of it. And as I think David's described in past presentations to the commission, we refer to the city's sea level rise approach here as we've historically referred to it as sort of a neighborhood approach, which is where there are specific policies for specific areas of a jurisdiction and that sort of thing. And that's been generally a newer approach for the commission too. We have a local government working group amongst our commissioners and some other representatives who've been meeting over the last several years, I think, to talk about complications with LCP updates, and particularly around sea level rise. And they've developed various sort of recommendations and given various presentations to our full commission on the topic and things like that. But that's all to say that this is a complicated thing that we're working out on our end. Is new for everyone, and yeah, it's just inherently complicated. I don't think that's not the city the city's doing. It's just a complicated thing by nature. But yeah, as I said, we've really appreciated all the collaboration. I think Ben described that we've been meeting at least once a week, at least for the last 6 months. But I know collaboration has gone back years before my time as well. So yeah, hope that answers the question. Sorry, that was long-winded.
Thank you for that, Amber.
Are there any other questions for Amber or for David? Anyone want to bring up an item for discussion? Yeah.
I have a small question on South G Street with that visitor serving outline that you showed so carefully. Why does it take a little jog in to dissecting all the way to G Street right there? What is the one property or so that's excluded as far as I can tell?
Yeah,
See, just towards the letter G.
Oh, this one right here?
Yeah, that thing. What is that?
It's interesting that you bring this up, because when I was looking at this the other day, I thought also about dropping this little bit right here. This is actually the park Yeah, Rotary Park. And so technically having the overlay there doesn't really have an effect because it's public facilities underlying zoning, but so we excluded it from the coastal visitors serving. We have 100% control over it. So obviously we're not gonna, I mean, it's actually, now that I'm saying this, it's a park. That's kind of a visitor serving.
It's already.
Yeah, it's visitor serving. I'll with the commission's recommendation, I'll have the map modified.
I think it's nice to have one big, shape without any holes in it. Other comments or question on the local coastal program? Last minute changes? Yeah.
Just a process question. There are, several sort of smaller zones that we're using this coastal element to correct, I think, omissions in the other code updating processes. So after, let's say this gets accepted and we move forward, is there then a revision process that happens in those originating documents, or do we just defer to the coastal overlay?
Yeah, no, we have to make the amendments to the underlying documents as well. Excuse me. So we're right now working to update the general plan, minor modifications that, for things that we found that were missing from our comprehensive update. And we're also working to make the zoning ordinance consistent with the general plan. And we're doing that with Lisa Weiss Consulting with the HUD Pro Housing grant that we won. And so during that process, we'll make those same amendments on those underlying documents that we're proposing to make here.
I have a quick question. Can you remind me about that wetland there at the end of N Street? You said that what is it being switched to? Or is it being preserved? I'm sorry. I thought that I might have missed that.
Let's see. So we're talking about this property right here. And I can pull up the aerial image to illustrate this more if you'd like, but basically there's a former log pond right here on this property. And when we originally had these maps produced for the general plan update, our consultant had basically painted this entire parcel blue and made this entire thing open space. When what our intent was to preserve the open space portion where the wetland is. This odd dimension right here follows the National Wetlands Inventory line. Typically we make, straight lines with the zoning, but this was based around a particular feature, so we followed that feature. And so the intent here was to not impose the open space standards on the entire parcel. It may be upon further review that because of setbacks and whatnot, this area is difficult to develop anyway. But we wanted to apply the zoning that was originally intended and appropriate for this location. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that did. Thank you.
Okay.
Is that Janes Creek that makes that division between the two sections of land? Or is Janes Creek further to the west?
Yeah, no, Janes Creek is over here. Yeah. Let's see, zooming out a little bit. Oops. So that inset is right here on the map, and the creek's over here.
There's a vacation rental section of the code, 2.14.030. And it says no less than 30 vacation rental permits. And I was thinking maybe it should be no more than, but maybe I'm misunderstanding that section.
Yeah, let me try and pull that up real quick. And that's in the zoning ordinance, right? Okay. So we can. Okay. Okay. There's my hand. Yeah, so the language, the way that it's written here, is intended to address the Coastal Commission's concern that if there weren't some provision to ensure that the vacation rentals could occur within the coastal zone, there could be a situation where all of the vacation rentals are outside the coastal zone, and they wanted to make sure that there was opportunities for low-cost visitor serving in the coastal zone by using vacation rentals. And so the intent here is that regardless of well, actually, this is a policy discussion that we have to have with the council rather. The way that I've currently envisioned it is that regardless of the cap on permits, there's a special carve out for the coastal zone. So right now we have a limitation. You can only have 100 permits issued for vacation rentals citywide unless you have an exemption. Exemptions are given for folks that live on the same property that the vacation rental occurs on, if you have a historic resource on that property, or if you offer it for vacation rental for fewer than 30 days in the year. So those are the three exceptions that would allow you to go above 100. Everyone else is capped at 100. If we had 100 outside the coastal zone, there would be none in the coastal zone. And so the way I envision this working is that even if we're at 100 outside the coastal zone, you could still do 30 within the coastal zone. So it's kind of a carve out for the permit limitation.
So it raises the cap to 130 by adding 30 no matter what in the coastal zone.
That's a good way of thinking about it, but it doesn't raise the cap if
we don't get to 100.
we don't get past 100.
Uh-huh.
So it's like a floating cap.
Yeah.
Up to 130.
Okay.
But you probably said it better. I mean, I'm probably overcomplicating it.
I just want to make sure I understand it. Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
How many are there in town?
What's that?
How many vacation rentals are
We have about 96 right now, I think. 96, 97. And I think we're right at the cap. And we've been floating around that cap for a while, and several of them are in the coastal zone. So I don't know exactly how many.
David, if you go to page 114 here, the map that we have in here doesn't show the change to the parcel at the end of N Street. And I was wondering if that's supposed to reflect that. Oh wait, yours does. Mine doesn't. Okay.
Yeah, so
Whatever. It's fine. You'll change. You
okay,
got
so
it.
here's what happened. Okay, full disclosure, because you're the second person who, Commissioner Lehman was also like, wait, what's up with the map? So earlier today, what I had in this map previously, and I've been working with our GIS team of one, Julie Sorfleet, who has been amazing at just cranking these maps out. Earlier today, I had a version of this map in here that identified these, even though they were goldenrod, I had a label over them that identified them as residential medium. So that's the version that you had downloaded and you have on your laptop right now. I sent in a request to Julie to amend the map and make these changes. And I was thinking sometime over the course of the next couple of weeks, she would actually do that. I got an email back from her like 30 minutes later that said, oh, it's in there. So thank you, Julie. Yeah, and then when I got that, I amended the map in this version. So version 4 now incorporates the changes that were originally identified just with a label.
Thanks.
Y'all are sharp. You're really looking at this stuff.
Other comments or suggested changes? Okay. So you need direction from us.
I need you to motion and second, and then with a voice vote of the majority of you, adopt resolution PC 2504.
And we're gonna change that resolution to have my name on it and not Scott's.
We're gonna change the resolution to have your name on it. I would also like to amend the action to incorporate the dark sky recommendations of the Waterkeeper.
The date is also a year off. In on the signature page, it
Oh.
says 2/20/20.
Okay, yeah, we'll update all that stuff. These are the approval documents from last year that have just carried forward. I was very ambitious and approved the staff report last year that we were going to take up today. But yeah, we'll make sure we get all those administrative details.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion? And I'll just like straw poll wise, I'm in favor of the Humboldt Waterkeeper suggestions on dark sky protections. Okay. Would anyone, I'm not supposed to do it as the chair. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure. I move we adopt resolution number PC 2504 and recommend to the city council that they adopt the local coastal element and coastal zoning ordinance with the addition of the dark sky elements suggested by Waterkeeper.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
None opposed, none abstaining? Okay. Just had to verify. We had a vote recently where there was a question about that. I want to thank you. I think I've mentioned this before, but I've been working on this local coastal program update almost my entire career here. And I'm like one council meeting, one open council meeting, and one consent calendar agenda item away from being able to deliver to the Coastal Commission something that I believe they will certify with minor changes. So thank you all.
Congrats.
And thank you, David.
And thank you to Ben and Amber online. Great presentations and a lot of helpful information and help for David.
Great. All right. So moving along, we have no business items tonight. And so we can close with correspondence and communications. Are there any correspondence from planning commissioners? David, do you have any correspondence?
I do not have any correspondence. I guess, yeah, I'll mention that our finance department, finance director / assistant city manager is holding the water rate study public engagement tomorrow night at the D Street Neighborhood Center at 5:30. For folks that are interested in attending that, and the workshop's going to be focused primarily around understanding how the rate changes will affect your bill and what that means to you, and to understand what the process, the 218 process looks like, including what you would need to do in order to file a petition against the water rate increases. So folks should know about that.
Thank you. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.